Okay, you start.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juliet Grames, and I am the editorial director at Soho Press, where I have the great privilege of editing the works of Mick Herron, our guest of honor here today. Welcome to Soho Crime and Mystery to Me's new virtual event series, The Lineup. This series is focused on highlighting Soho Crime authors and giving them a digital platform to talk about their work. Our next event will be our fall showcase on October 3rd at 1 p.m. Central Time or 2 p.m. Eastern, which will feature Leonie Swan, James R. Ben, and Stephen Mac Jones. You can register for that event now at sohocrimelineup.com. Now today, a limited number of signed first edition copies through Soho Crime's indie bookstore event partners, including the wonderful Mystery to Me, our host today. So you are really, really going to want to pre-order yours. It is a very limited number of copies. Mick, all the way over in UK, signed these copies, and they were sent back to us across oceans on boats. So they're very exciting things for us to have, but there aren't very many of them. And so if you use the button below the video now and to pre-order, you could receive a limited edition Slough House tote bag, which my colleague Lily has shared here. It's very excellent and a little bit rude, and we love them. And while supplies last, you could get one of those. So all the lineup events will be live streamed and recorded on Crowdcast. So afterwards, you can watch it back using the same link you registered with or via the event archive tab on sohocrimelineup.com. That's my little scripted preview. And now I get to jump into the heart of our discussion today. I'm so excited to present Mick Herron. I know probably you're here because you already know who he is and how wonderful he is. If you happen to be here meeting Mick for the first time and this is your first exposure to him and his oeuvre of spectacular literature, I'm so excited for you. You have so much discovery ahead of you. Mick is one of the great crime fiction writers, but be delighted, you will be amused, you'll have your heart broken, and again and again,
We had beforehand,
you'll be laughing out loud almost the whole time. Mick is the author of 16 novels, so that is 4 in the Oxford Mystery Series, 8 in the Slough House series, and 4 standalones, including The Secret Hours, which is coming out in less than a month. So, and which we're here to give you a sneak peek of today. He is the winner of the Crime Writers Association Gold Dagger. It's Ian Fleming's Steel Dagger, the Ellery Queen Reader's Choice Award, the Theakston's Old Peculiar Crime Novel of the Year, and the Last Laugh Award. So very decorated gentleman next to me. And in an exciting non-literary turn of affairs, the Slough House series has been made into an absolutely jaw-droppingly excellent streaming series on Apple TV Plus. You should go watch it. It has Gary Oldman as Jackson Lamb, Kristen Scott Thomas as Diana Taverner, and some other very pretty people who are also happen to be excellent actors, peopling the rest of these roles that are so near and dear to us. So go check it out. So that's all my intro I'm going to give for you, Mick. But I want to say thank you for being here today with us.
It's a delight to be here, Juliet. Lovely to see you.
So 1 month until Secret Hours comes out. Are you spending these last couple weeks of your vacation doing nice summery things?
Oh, it'd be nice to think so. I have actually spent the past 2 days, since yesterday, as my editor, you'll be delighted to know this, I have written 15,000 words since yesterday morning. But 7,500 of those words were Mick, and 7,500 of those words were Herron, because I've been signing copies of The Secret Hours in a warehouse in Didcot, which is near Oxford. The sun is shining beautifully here in the south of the UK, and I've been in a warehouse writing my name over and over and over again. I'm just glad I'm not called Alexander McCall Smith right at the moment, because I'd still be there if I were.
And then that would have been 15,000 words. Wait a minute. You're telling me it's sunny in England right now?
Yeah, unusually, yes. It's because I'm in a warehouse, I think.
I think we'll end up coming back to the weather later, since you are British, and I assume you want to talk about the weather a lot, right?
Always.
I understood, however, that there has actually been some hardship in your household this summer, and a member of your household actually sustained a grievous injury. Lily, would you show us the picture that Mick sent earlier today? Poor Tommy.
Yeah,
What happened to Tommy here?
That's Tommy in his little house. We're
His
not calling it a cage.
Oh, we don't call it a cage.
We don't call it a cage. It's a little house. Yes, he broke his hip 6.5 weeks ago, and he's fine. I mean, he had an operation then, and he had a follow-up X-ray on Tuesday. And the vet's very pleased with him, but he's not allowed out. So because we have 2 cats, when Tommy's unsupervised, he has to be in the little house, so he can't get out of the cat flap.
Now, do we know how he broke his hip?
He hasn't said. No, he went out to play one Sunday evening and he came limping back, crying. It was very, very sad. We ended up in the emergency vet at midnight on a Sunday, which is about as fun-filled an experience as you can imagine from my just saying the words. It was a very, very sad evening, in fact. Tommy was fine, really. I mean, he's injured, but he's a young cat. He's only 2. He'll recover nicely. But there were some very sad people at the vets on midnight on a Sunday. It was raining.
Raining. Could it have been a secret mission of some kind in the rain? I understand spy cats always perform their missions in the rain.
It almost certainly involved an attempt to find food somewhere. we think he just fell off a fence or something. I mean, Tommy is a most beautiful cat, but if you were to draw up a list of the cats most likely to fall off something, I think Tommy would be quite near the top.
Lily, could you show the second picture of Tommy? So it is purported that Tommy does, in fact, get his freedom and that he is allowed out of his house with supervision. And this was the evidence I was offered.
That's him, Tommy ruling the roost.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's Tommy's sofa. And he's obviously eyeing food there at the moment because he looks quite happy. He's a lovely cat. We're very, very fond of him.
Well, thank you, Lily. So, Tommy, we all wish you a speedy recovery, but I know everyone here wants to hear not only about your cats, thank you for indulging that, Mick, but they also want to hear about the secret hours. So I was thinking to myself, what are you going to say about the secret hours, Juliet? And, like all of your books, it is nearly impossible to talk about without spoiling the plot. But I'm going to try. So,
because I'm not. Carry on.
So for those in the audience who haven't heard yet about The Secret Hours, this is a standalone espionage novel. It starts in the MI5 of today. Actually, it starts with an inquiry into MI5, an audit, if you will, into possible overreach and malfeasance in the history of this organization, because there is an unfriendly prime minister who's trying to get some people in trouble. And the inquiry is stymied and looks to be going nowhere until it does. It goes somewhere indeed. And we learn some shocking secrets that take us back to Berlin in 1994, right after the Cold War. And I can't say anything more than that. But I guarantee it will knock your socks off. And it is a standalone novel, so it's a great starting point for people who aren't already familiar with Mick and his amazing characters and his Slough House series in particular. So I do say this is a great starting point if you are looking for a starting point for a Mick Herron book. But yeah, so when I was struggling with my synopsis today, Mick, you sent me an alternate synopsis, which you told me is being used on another edition. So I thought that was especially helpful for the readers. I'm going to share it now. This is what Mick sent me. The Secret Hours, which is out next month, is about spies because it's an English book, and they do most of their spying in the rain because it's an English book. Sorry. They're small boys, obviously, because big boys don't spy, and nor does no woman, no spy, neither. And is set partly in London and partly in Berlin, allowing the spies to spy themselves not one, but 2 rivers, the Thames and whatever the river in Berlin is. Note to self, Google this. In the end, because it's an English book, everyone ends up sad and alcoholic spying into their beer. Is that kind of spoiler free, would you say?
Pretty much, yeah, but it also covers everything, I think. Thank you.
Okay, so because we promised no spoilers, Mick, can you tell us about the origin of this book? Where did it come from? Why did you write it?
The origin was very different from how I ended up, because I started with the very first sentence, which is something my brother David said to me as we were out walking around one of the green lanes in Devon, which is where the book starts. And he said to me, "The worst smell in the world is dead badger." And I just like that as an opening line for a book. So the book actually starts with a character called Max. Well, that's a cover name. He woken in the middle of the night in his cottage in North Devon by assailants and ends up on the run down these green lanes. These green lanes are wonderful places. If you know Devon at all, you may have come across them. They're very narrow passages between small trees and shrubbery. You can't see anything except the path in front of you and behind. And they cover a lot of the county. Geoffrey Household's novel Rogue Mail, there's a chase sequence in that book, which was written about 1940, which a lot of the chasing goes on in Devon's Green Lanes. So I started with that notion, and it was really deciding what Max's history was going to be that led me into the rest of the book. I'd already had the idea also for the Committee of Inquiry, because I like writing about bureaucracy. I like writing about civil servants, or my notion of how civil servants operate. And I like writing about the politics of frustration, really, the politics of bureaucracy and frustration, and the way institutions are constantly thwarted in doing what they apparently are setting out to do. I like the idea of these big missions coming to nothing because of all the red tape that has to be abided by and all the forms that have to be filled out. So that's often the kind of subject matter that I'm writing about. My character's in Slough House. This isn't a Slough House novel, but that kind of atmosphere still prevails. My character in Slough House are always frustrated by not being able to get on with the actual action that they want to pursue, but they have to instead sit at their desks and do all this soul-destroying paperwork. I mean, obviously they get to do all the action anyway, but
I'm trying to remember which critic it was who described Slough House as John Le Carré by way of The Office. But
I think that's probably fair enough. I mean, The Office, the UK version of The Office, is actually set in Slough, and that's purely coincidental. I came up with Slough because I had the phrase slow horses, which was what I wanted to use. So Slough House became the para rhyme, the slant rhyme for slow horses, in order for me to be able to give them that nickname. So the fact that the place is called Slough House is purely coincidence, but yes, it's often been compared to the world of The Office. More the UK version than the US version, because the US version is quite soft-centered, really, and has a heart of gold. The UK version doesn't.
Well, I would say that your books have a heart of gold some of the time. I do want to say, I have been specifically told, Mick, that I'm not allowed to ask you if you are, or if you have ever been a spy. So I'm not asking you that now, obviously.
Well, it's a difficult question because you hear different stories. I mean, I've always claimed that I've not been a spy, but you do hear rumours. There was we were at the Harrogate Crime Festival not long ago, and a friend of mine, the thriller writer Luca Veste, was approached by a woman. He didn't know her, but she told him that she knew for a fact that I definitely used to work for GCHQ. Now, I've always claimed that I never worked for GCHQ, but she seemed very certain of the facts. So who do you believe? I mean, it's a tricky subject, really.
It is very tricky, which is why I'm not asking you that question, Mick. But I do want to address the fact that even in your deep backlist, which has been characterized as detective fiction, I'm talking about the Oxford novels, and there is still a very strong espionage through line. And right from Down Cemetery Road, we have those. Is that just your interest in current affairs that will bleed into your fiction telling? Or no, the question I want to ask you is, can you talk about your relationship to espionage and espionage fiction? And I mean, right from the beginning of your career, what pulled you into that?
It's almost always been accidental in a way. I mean, that strand in Down Cemetery Road, where the intelligence services do become involved in the action, was simply in order to make the plot work, really, because ideally I wanted to focus throughout on the single individual character of Sarah, but I couldn't manage to do that then. I probably couldn't do it now, to be honest. So I had to bring in other perspectives, and in doing that, I sort of accidentally fell into the notion of it being the intelligence service. But there was sort of bad actors in the intelligence service. You know, this isn't the world of security as a force for good. It's always, you know, rogue operatives going off message quite severely in that book. So it was really then simply to provide the excuse to have these people who were in positions of power and able to control events, and also, in the case of one or two of the individuals, to have malign intent. The intelligence services, or the world of spies and spooks, offered that in a way that nothing else immediately did, to my mind. The rest of the book, after that, I kind of returned to the private eye genre, because one of the Zoe character herself was who was in the book, quite a small role, then became a central character in the following books as I wrote about private investigators. I returned in Reconstruction to the intelligence world, and that was largely because, again, it was an excuse to bring a broader focus to what I was actually wanting to write about, which was the siege in a local nursery school. And I didn't want that to be a siege undertaken by someone who themselves had bad motives. You know, I wanted that kind of conflict there. That would simply be, you know, bad person in school, how to get rid of bad person without anybody getting hurt. And that would have been, that's a different sort of book. It wasn't the one I wanted to write. There have been very good versions of that book since, I have to say. So again, I brought the intelligence services in a slightly better way than previously, in order to provide the backstory to that, the motivation behind the intrusion, and so on. So really, I mean, the spies were incidental until I came to write Slow Horses, and that's when I decided to bring the focus on them and have the characters themselves as spies. And writing about spies, in a way, was making a virtue of my limitations. I'm not a researcher. I don't like writing. I don't like working too hard on the backdrop to books. I like to make stuff up. I like to focus on the characters and what they're thinking and what they're feeling and what they say to each other and how they behave. That's what interests me as a writer. But nevertheless, you know, as a thriller writer, or the thriller genre itself places demands on a plot. You know, you do have to have a functioning plot. You have some kind of device that's going on and working. You know, the mechanism has to be there, and everything doing what it should do in order to get from the beginning to the end. The other thing about thrillers, of course, is they have to have an end. You have an end point that you're aiming for.
It's encouraged.
Yeah, this is serious stuff. And so spies allowed me to write about such things without knowing too much about them. I can make I like and say that's how spies work. And all I'm throwing on are books I've read, films I've seen, and stuff that I make up. But if it sounds plausible, then people assume that it has authenticity to it. Nothing I write is authentic, but I hope that a lot of it is plausible.
All right, that's charmingly humble, and I buy about 18% of it, because you know, whether or not you're using outside research or spy intelligence that maybe the general populace doesn't have access to necessarily, I do think it's fascinating that so many books in the Slough House series have predicted events that happened 18 to 24 months after the book's publication. For example,
that's because I'm a practicing witch. That's got nothing to do with the novel writing.
Okay. All right. So I should be pursuing the witch line, not the spy line, and that's certainly not a distraction. Okay, wait. So to come back to Secret Hours now, because we do have this wonderful standalone that is about spies. It's about interrogating the value of a spy to a society. That's our starting point, and then from there, the ramifications of the life of a spy. I'm curious, what made you decide to have the crux of this novel, or a big piece of this novel, set in Berlin in immediately after the Cold War? Like, what was happening in your life in 1994? Like, do you remember this moment, is it something you wanted to write about? Are you bring us there, Mick?
Almost accidental again. I mean, Berlin, because Berlin is the heart of the Cold War. That's where everything happened. There's a great deal of romance about it. I visited Berlin, but not until much more recently than the period I was writing about. But it's there in all the great thrillers, really, all the great Cold War thrillers. So it's impossible to avoid if you're thinking about the inverted commas romance and history of the Cold War. The year was chosen simply because it fits in with the timeline that I'd already developed. If characters are this old now, then I don't want them to be. I want them to be old enough to have been involved in doing stuff, but not too old then, and not too young either. So 94. I think if I'm writing about a character who is in early to mid 60s now, then taking back to 94 means they were mid 30s ish, and that's the right kind of age to allow them to have had a bit of history there, and be a bit damaged and knocked about a bit, but not but still very much active and involved. So it was purely timing. And if I'd written this book in 10 years' time, I'd have had to do it differently. I'd have had to choose it differently.
So I think you've dropped a really valuable hint to the audience who's listening right there. But I have promised no spoilers. So Mick, I decided that one of the best ways to talk about the secret hours and not spoil anything in my side of the dialogue is to ask you to read from it, because then you can control what exactly you want to spoil or not. Would you grace us with the reading?
I will do a reading, and I'm going to do it from quite near the beginning of the book, so that there is no possibility of a spoiler. Also, it doesn't really need an introduction, because this is in itself an introduction. This is how the Committee of Inquiry, which is called Monochrome, how it came into being. As everyone in the know knew, and many on the fringes guessed, the establishment of the Monochrome Inquiry, announced with less fanfare than the then PM's mini-break at Peppa Pig World, was intended to leave the service rattled. There was history there. Prior to his ascension, the Prime Minister had enjoyed a sabbatical as Foreign Secretary, a period of what one observer described as bubble-wrap diplomacy, with the emphasis on bursting bubbles rather than offering protection. Its lowlights included an extended sentence in a foreign prison for a British subject innocent of wrongdoing, and a number of indiscreet liaisons on a number of continents, the only context in which the word continent might be applied to the minister's activities. While such behaviour was regarded by those around him as priced in, warranting no more than shrugs or backslaps, several of his newfound friendships raised concern at Regent's Park. That the minister's predilection for being wined and dined overcame scruples about the company he kept was hardly headline news, but the roll call of those he was carousing with was starting to resemble a casting call for a Bond villain. After an incident in Gdansk, in which the Foreign Secretary had allowed a new chum to install a dating app on his official phone, one which, he was assured, was 200% discreet, it was felt that enough was enough, and his then boss was informed that a Minister of State had come dangerously close to giving a foreign intelligence service access to the restricted Downing Street network. With an alacrity which suggested that she'd been waiting for the opportunity, she sacked him, whereupon he, in turn, parlayed his newfound victim status into a leadership bid. The rest was history, in the long-term sense of being both tragic and farcical. But whatever tactical advantage the incoming PM had gained from the Park's interference, he nevertheless regarded it as an act of preemptive treason, which ultimately led to the Monochrome Inquiry and the notification of its schedule that reached Regent's Park after circulating Westminster. The inquiry will be panelled by an all-party body, it ran, with 2 independent appointees to ensure objectivity. Its remit, to investigate historical overreaching by the intelligence services. Its duration, open-ended. Quote, any and all matters regarding potential misconduct by officers of the service in pursuit of official instruction are to be regarded as material to the inquiry. All officially held informational resources, save those pertaining to live operations, are to be made available to sitting members. Or, in other words, unlock your doors, open your cupboards. You can come back now, Juliet.
I was trying. I still love that. I've read that section so many times now, and it never loses its sparkle. Thank you, Mick. I really appreciate it. So that brings me to, I did want to ask you about when you're creating the standalone world. You have a standalone scenario here, very powerful, contained story about a cast of characters that we haven't met before. When you're writing a standalone, and this is your fourth, so they're for people in the audience who may not know about the backlist standalones, they're amazing. They're to be discovered. Actually, Lily, could you go ahead and share that slide now? I really wanted to tell people about them. I think we're all waiting for the next Slough House book, and sometimes 18 months go by in between. You should know about Mick's standalone backlist. So we'll talk about these a little bit, but Nobody Walks, Reconstruction, This Is What Happened are the three real standalone novels that are sort of by MI5 adjacent, Slough House adjacent. They're set in a world that is very close to the Slough House world. Sometimes bit characters overlap, and I think there's a sense of satisfaction and familiarity to readers who know Slough House, and yet they are standalone novels. So, Mick, my question for you is: how do you walk that tightrope when you're in the point of composition? Is it hard to disengage from your series writing, which I imagine must be a very different exercise to propel forward through a thriller plot with these characters who are so familiar to you and to us, versus to do a contained standalone story like The Secret Hours or one of these others?
Well, I haven't really attempted to do it that often. I mean, Reconstruction predates Slough House. It was a couple of novels later that I wrote Slow Horses, so that wasn't an effort, that it purely was a different kind of assignment, as it were. When I wrote Nobody Walks, which was the first standalone I'd written once I started on the series, I quite happily embraced parts of the universe that I'd already created. I mean, Ingrid Turney appears in it, Diane Tavernet appears in it. There's a backstory to J.K. Coe in the novel Nobody Walks. He ends up in Slough House a couple of books later. So I was quite happy to kind of have one foot in, one foot out when I was writing that book. This Is What Happened is the only one that I've really tried to do something entirely different. And in many ways, it's a novel I'm proudest of, because it's the novel, the finished version of the book was the closest to how I imagined it before I started writing. The gap that you end up with, you'll know this as a novelist, there's a metric that only an author can use regarding the success or otherwise of the novel that they're writing, and that's the gap that exists between what they thought they were going to end up with and what they actually end up with. And This Is What Happened, that gap is narrower than it's been in any other book I've written, and for that reason, for one of several reasons, it's perhaps the book I'm proudest of. It's quite different. It's written in a different style as well. I mean, I did quite deliberately attempt to do something different with that book. There were no semicolons in it, as you'll remember. I mean, I'm big on semicolons, but taking them out meant the sentence structure becomes very different. The sentences are all a lot shorter. That's actually true of Nobody Walks as well. 2 books, no semicolons.
Didn't you tell me that This Is What Happened? I may be misremembering that, but you actually wrote it almost linearly, beginning to end. That just came out. Yeah,
I did. And I planned it very carefully in a way that I hadn't any others. It's in sort of five chapters, I think, and the first 4.5 chapters I planned very carefully. I knew scene by scene. I had a kind of breakdown in a notebook, and the last half chapter I left open so it could the ending would be quite organic. But that's the only time I've ever done that. It was possible to do that for me then, because there are only really 3 characters in it. It's a 3-hander. I couldn't do that with one of these Slough House novels, because there are about 15, 16 characters in it that I might be writing about, and I can't plot that in advance. There's I have to allow for the kind of give and take of character interchange.
Are you telling me you don't plot your Slough House novels?
I don't. I mean, I don't plot them in any great detail. I don't even plot my sentences, to be honest. Quite often, I'll start a sentence, and I'll go and have a rest in the middle of it, because I've got no idea how it's going to finish. I write to a rhythm, so I know how long a sentence is going to be when I start writing it. and I often know what the first novel is going to be, and I know the second novel will kind of balance that, but I haven't worked out what it'll be, or where it will go.
Well, as
often
much
they fall into lists of one sort or another, but I'm not necessarily sure what the list is going to be of.
you sound like a musician.
Thank you. That's a very nice thing to say. I'm not a musician. I have no musical talent whatsoever, but I admire music a lot, so I'll take that.
That's incredible. I mean, that explains. I think when I hear craftists talk about rhythm, it's always the people whose craft you can get so lost in. Where I think there's something instinctive that some writers have, where they do hear the rhythm of the sentence, and there's something inchoate in the reading experience there. You don't recognize what it is that's keeping you so bound into the prose. So that it's interesting to hear that you're actually planning the rhythm in your head, and it's not just a sort of a secondary effect of where you're going with the content.
Oh no, I think it's the driving force a lot of the time. Yeah.
That's incredible. I have to think about that more. But I do think, we actually have a comment from someone, and please, anyone who wants to, I'm going to open it up for Q&A in about 5 minutes. So now's a great time if you have questions and you want to put them in the chat box, and I'll be looking at them and moderating those. But we do have at least one person on today who has never read any of your books before, Mick, and who's asking what a good starting point is. And so I think specifically talking about The Secret Hours and the Slough House series, and they are adjacent, they are in this spy world. The first book to start with there, besides The Secret Hours, which is a fantastic standalone, would be Slow Horses, the first book in the Slough House series. But Mick was just talking about This Is What Happened, and it's one of his backlist books that I wish even more people would read. It is so perfect. So in the event you've already pre-ordered your limited signed edition of The Secret Hours from our wonderful host, Mystery to Me today, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, rats, I really wanted to support this great independent bookstore. What book should I buy? May I suggest This Is What Happened is a fantastic Mick Herron backlist book that everyone should discover. I would tell you what it's about, but I can't. It is actually yet another Mick Herron book that is impossible to talk about without completely spoiling the plot. I remember when you sent it to me, and I said, what is it about? And I think you said, I'm afraid I can't say. I think that's what you said to me, Mick. That sounds familiar. Yeah.
I don't remember that. It sounds like me. Yeah.
But anyway,
I'm really awful with spoilers. I don't even like reading blurbs of books. I know I'm going to read them. If an author I admire has a book out, I don't want to know anything about it before I start reading it.
Yeah. I agree with you. Well, this is a book to read. It's a book to read. It's what I like to say about it is it's about one ordinary young woman who has the chance to do something extraordinary. And when she takes that chance, she gets into an adventure she never imagined. How about that?
That works for me.
That all happens on the first page, so there haven't been any. So I do, like I said, I'm going to open this up for questions really soon. And okay. So please do put comments into the Q&A if you have them. Wonderful, wonderful attendees. But in the meantime, I only have a couple more questions for you, Mick. So first of all, I was also told I wasn't allowed to ask you this question, but I've been dying to ask this of you for 18 months since I last was allowed to interview you at Left Coast Crime when you were the guest of honor there in 2022. And you forbade me to ask you what your favorite dinosaur was. I'm asking you.
That still holds. My favorite dinosaur. I don't really know anything about dinosaurs. I'd go for the obvious T-Rex probably. Except it's such little hands. Some dinosaurs in your house are going to be very, very disappointed. And wrong answer, but that's the best I'm going to come up with, I'm afraid.
Okay, and then
plesiosaur. Or is it plesiosaurus? One of those, anyway. The underwater one.
I feel like you're just reaching now, Mick. You're just going for whatever dinosaurs you can think of. I wish my 4-year-old were here to talk to you, because he would probably have some suggestions. But and finally, I heard that your mum might be attending this event today, and I wanted to.
Well, actually, she's rung during the course of the conversation. My phone's on silent. I suspect that means that she didn't quite. Either she disagreed so violently with something I said that she needed to make her opinion felt immediately, or she didn't actually get on, and I don't think she realised it was actually happening now. I think she's obviously just been broadcast. Otherwise, she probably wouldn't have called me. She might be listening now. I don't know. Hi, Mum. I'll see you tomorrow.
I wanted to say hi to her as well.
Yeah.
And thank you for your gift to the world, this amazing writer.
Well, one of many gifts to the world. Yeah. I hope she'll be able to watch a recording of this anyway, unless you know we were talking about it.
That's great. She should know. So my last question for you is, can you tell us what's next?
Back to Slough House. Yes, the next book will be a Slough House book with all the usual stuff going on, and I hope some new stuff as well as soon as I manage to think of it. Got great rhythm so far, but not much of a plot. I'm only on page 3.
Okay, and you've promised me. I gave you that list of characters you're not allowed to kill off, and you've still got it, right?
I no longer have it, no, and I've forgotten what you wrote on it, so I'm just taking that as carte blanche, I'm afraid.
I was afraid of that.
There's going to be blood in this one, Juliet. Nobody's walking away from this book.
Nobody walks. Nobody walks away. So what about in terms of the Apple TV series? We've had 2 fantastic seasons that are out. Can you tell us anything? Can we expect anything from the series this year, or?
Yes, I think so. I have not yet seen series 3, but I was talking to one of the producers just earlier today, and he said they're arranging a screening at the moment. So I will see that before long, and I'll let you know whether it's any good. I think it's going to be good, actually. The trailer's fantastic. And the footage I've seen of season 4, they filmed the books back to back, so 2 seasons that have been shown were filmed over the course of a year, and they've filmed books 3 and 4 now, but they'll be shown as 2 separate series. 4 is wrapped now. I've got all the lingo. I've been hanging around on films. Let's say things like wrap. 4 has wrapped now, and that will be shown sometime next year, I guess. Yeah.
So what exactly is your involvement in the series? Do you get to write those episodes? Are you sitting and do you get to tell them what they can do or not do? Do you lock yourself away so that you don't see them at all until they've been broadcast?
I'm in the writer's room, and I take part in the planning of the show, sort of episode by episode, scene by scene. I haven't done any of the writing yet, but I think I might try my hand at that if it goes on. And it seems to be very successful so far. And so fingers crossed it will move on into books 5 and 6 at some point, in which case I might well try a bit of script writing.
Is it exciting to watch the characters you created being rendered into this other media by other writers, or is it are there moments of frustration where you're like, I didn't intend that? Or
no, it's all excitement rather than frustration. The cast are fantastic. The writers have been wonderful, and they've adhering pretty closely to the source material. Where the plots depart quite strongly from the source material, it's always been with my blessing and connivance, in fact, because I'm there when we're plotting these things. So that's all been really quite fantastic. Couldn't ask for a better cast. I mean,
yeah.
Christian Scott Thomas and Gary Oldman, between them, it wouldn't matter about the rest of the cast, but the rest of the cast, as it happens, are all fantastic. So no, I'm having the time of my life watching it, and I don't feel possessive of it. I don't feel that when I see the actors sort of taking ownership of the characters, I'm all for it. I think they're doing a grand job, and that's a necessary part of making the show what it is and making it a success. So no, I'm loving it.
I so rarely feel satisfied by media representations of books that I loved, and I have really enjoyed the show. So it's either, for whatever that's worth, either they've kept it really faithful because I love the book so much and they haven't taken anything away from me, or they're just really awesome. But yeah, I can't wait for season 3. That's exciting. Okay, let me see. Now we've got a bunch of questions pouring in. I wasn't paying attention. Okay. So, I will be happy if the answer is never. But do you have any plans to stop writing the Slough House books? Also, may I ask if you know how long the TV version will run? We've had a piece of that, but...
Piece of that, yeah. Well, we know there are another 12 episodes have been filmed, and I think everybody involved is hoping that, that the following 2 books will be next up. And a certain amount of work has been done, but we await, word from on high, really, as to whether the cameras can roll. Keep your fingers crossed. Everybody tune in to seasons 3 and 4 and watch them and say nice things about them on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now.
And encourage all of your friends to subscribe to Apple TV Plus and, boost it.
Yeah, all that sort of thing. Do I have plans to stop writing the Slough House books? I don't have plans to stop, but I think I have an awareness that I ought to maybe think about how it would stop.
No, we'll talk about the top line.
I think in a way it would be nice to write a final book. To draw it to a close rather than just have things end. When I pass on. If I do that in the middle of a book or anything, it would be a bit disappointing, wouldn't it? But if we had a kind of final book that would draw a line under everything. Maybe. I'm not planning. I'm just talking off the top of my head here. Don't worry. I have no plans to either.
These events are for is for your editor to learn these things that you're going to say, so that she can try to talk you out of them offline. Yeah. Okay. No. Thank you for that comment. That was very important. Thank you, whoever left that. I have wondered from a craft standpoint, like if part of a series writer may fantasize about how they're going to conclude their series, because of course every novel you write, you have to know the conclusion of the novel, right? There's still a story arc component to a series. I'm curious, do you derive a different sense of satisfaction out of writing a book that is not a series book? Is it more or less?
I think that's interesting. I think there is a feeling of completion there which you wouldn't get in a series. I do try to end books quite finally. I mean, a lot of my books seem to end on quite an elegiac note. That's just comes back to the idea of rhythm, I suppose. But yes, when writing something like This Is What Happened, or Nobody Walks, although I still get emails about the ending of Nobody Walks, it wraps up in a way that the series doesn't. The series holds things open. A couple of the series books, I've dangled something in front of the readers, left things out on the ledge a bit. Sometimes, not always. But of course, you can't really do that with a standalone. I say that, and then I think about Nobody Walks. And maybe I did do that with Nobody Walks. Maybe people are still waiting to find out what really happens in the end. But certainly, from my point of view, when I know that these characters are not to be revisited, and there's, it is a story and it has been told, and that's the end, then yes, there's a sense of completeness to it, which doesn't arrive with the Slough House novels. There's always a certain amount of satisfaction in coming to an end. Although you probably know this yourself. I mean, reaching the end of a novel isn't. It's part sense of achievement and relief, but there's also, you're left feeling bereft, aren't you? I mean, even if we know visiting these characters again, to leave the world of a very specific novel that you've been living in for however long it is, and for me, it's a year, 14, 15 months.
Yeah.
That's sad. Even if I'm going to step back into a very similar sort of world not long afterwards, there's still a feeling that, I suppose part of it is feeling I could have done that better. Maybe that's not quite the book I should have written. A lot of the starting again is the next one's going to be better. That's what drives the writer on.
That gap you were talking about between the book you originally envisioned and what you ended up producing.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing about a series is that the gap is forever closable, right? Or it forever seems to be closable. You always have a future opportunity to get back to the little grain that you thought you were starting with.
That illusion is constant, yeah.
This sort of seems to tie into me, but one listener today has asked, why do you use the word hope so frequently?
Do I? That's interesting. I hope that speaks to maybe that speaks to something within me. If I use it a lot, I don't know. It's a good word to use in lyrical writing, I think. And although I do write a lot of fairly balance between the lyrical and the profane, I think, in my writing, and the profane is where a lot of the humour lies. But there's a lot of lyrical stuff in what I write, and hope is part of that.
Someone has asked, which character in the Slough House series do you most see yourself as?
I've put more of my own personal habits into J.K. Coe than I consciously did in any of my other characters. So the fact that he turns out to be something of a psychopath was, kind of distressing to me, let alone my editor and my other readers. I mean, obviously, people who've seen the TV show will recognise that that the character of River Cartwright, we're pretty much identical. They've found an actor who, in terms of simply looks and a general sort of appeal,
it's uncanny, Mick.
It's uncanny that they've done that. So readers might obviously think that because physically we resemble each other so strongly, they might feel that that's the character where I most strongly reside. But in fact, it would be a balance between J.K. Coe and Catherine. I think Catherine does a lot of me and her. That's me, Joe.
I love that. Another listener today asks, were you involved in the brilliant casting of the television series, as long as we're talking about?
As with most other aspects of the TV show, I'm happy to take all the credit for everything that went right, even when I had no say in it whatsoever. I mean, I was there when names were discussed. But no, the job of casting a TV series, I mean, to the layperson, it sounds brilliant, doesn't it? You just sit there thinking, ooh, who should we get to play this part? But logistics play a part in it, which actors are available, how long they're going to be available for if you're playing a TV series.
Right.
And all that sort of thing. It's very, very complicated, very, very difficult, and you have to get people at the right time. I gather, I just know this anecdotally, that many TV shows have fallen apart because an actor said they would do it, and then by the time everything else has fallen into place, the money, the director and so on, they're no longer available, and therefore everything else falls apart again. So we were very, very lucky in the casting. Once it's also true that once Gary had signed up for the part, that did draw a lot of other people in. Everybody, all the actors wanted to work with Gary because he's amazing, and you can see that in the way the ensemble plays. They're all having great fun. You can tell. So no, I had nothing to do with it. I'm absolutely delighted with the way it turned out, though. And as I say, happy to take the credit.
Okay, I've got another question here. Do real spies, unlike you, Mick, you're not a spy, do real spies come up to you and comment on the Slough House books?
I've had a couple of comments. Not that long ago, I had a conversation with somebody who was a former chief security advisor to Her Majesty's government, or it was Her Majesty at the time. I can't remember the exact title he had, but he was very, very senior. And the comments I've had from people like that when I've met them have always been quite worrying, in as much as they say they recognise a lot of things that I write about. Given that I write about failure and incompetence and people acting without the best of intentions, even if or misapplying means, for what are perhaps creditable ends, that's quite worrying to me. Yeah. I don't really believe that the actual intelligence service could run in the way that I portray it, but I do think that however it is actually run, it is run by individuals, people with their own forms of motivation and their own agendas, which will be bound up in their personalities as much as anything else, and their character and their temperament. And that's really what I'm writing about. People who do let their character and temperament get the better of them.
Yeah, it is. It's disturbing to think about. I think one of the points I love most about each of these characters in the Slough House series, they are each broken in their own way. Something has brought them to Slough House that makes them a bit of an outlier for mainstream population, right? Whatever it is. And it is interesting to think about something as monumental as our safety, our public safety, national security being entirely at the hands of a group of people who may all have chosen their profession because they're a little bit of an outlier from the mainstream, and what I mean, especially the characters you create, which may or may not be more extreme than the integers who are actually doing these jobs in real life. But it certainly, behind all the jokes, there are those sobering questions about our responsibilities and the power of the institutions that we have to sort of live within. And
I think, yes, I think for me, I mean, the characters are important in the sense that they're how I find my way into the world, but it's the nature of the institutions that perhaps worries me, if anything does, when I'm writing about such things. The purposes and uses to which institutions can be put. Yeah. It's when we have people in power who are not worthy of the position, and here in the UK, we've had a number of instances of that over the past few years. And over in the United States, if I may say so, I can also think of a couple of examples of similar things happening. And that's when institutions either show themselves at their best when they're acting in a kind of check and balance sort of way, or at their worst when they allow themselves to be manipulated by people who really shouldn't be wielding any kind of power at all.
Yeah. And that's why we read your books, Mick, because they help us stay on point on that very, very, very important point. Okay, I have aside from the 17,500 signatures, roughly how long does it take you to produce a manuscript you'll show to your editor?
It's kind of hard to say because it's contingent on other things like how busy I am in the other aspects of life. I mean, publicity for I intended to do a lot of to really start work on this new book in September. I started taking notes and thinking about it back in April. That's when the date appears in my notebook for this new book that I'm writing. I have written bits and pieces, but it's mostly disconnected. It's bits of dialogue, bits of description, bits of character interaction. I write quite a bit of that. I avoid blank page as long as possible. So by the time I start, I thought I'll start in September. I knew that I would have hopefully about 10,000 words of other stuff, which I could force in. And I've probably done that, but once September starts, I actually start off on a publicity tour, so I'll do hardly anything. Hardly any work in September at all. I did start writing page 1 a couple of weeks ago. I've been writing the opening scene. I usually have a kind of montage sequence. After there'll be a prologue bit and then the montage sequence. And this montage sequence opens generally with a description of Slough House itself. I've currently got a piece that's about 1,000 words long. It's taken me 6 or 7 days to write it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that, it's always the slowest part of the book to write.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of deleting. I will write 400 words in a day, and the next day I will delete 200 of them. And then, it goes on like that. It's all very slow. It'll pick up after I get through that. And once I'm back at the desk again, which won't really be till October, I would hope to write 400 or 500 words a day. And a lot of that then gets deleted out. But I'm hoping this book will be about 90,000 words. I have a personal deadline of next September for finishing it.
And no dead badgers this time?
I haven't decided yet. I will probably kill some other kind of being.
Not my list.
No, I must look at your list. Yeah. It's probably where all the commas are.
I don't want to talk about first. You had to talk about semicolons. Now you want to argue about commas in front of these poor people.
I think that's probably an argument best kept behind closed doors. I'm mute button here, so.
Well, someone who would probably sympathize with you, someone named Kara Black, has said, "Love the reference to Rogue Male." Thanks for the insight, Mick.
Thank you, Kara. Hi. Are you well? I'm hoping that was a yes.
Okay, let me see. Did I get all the questions? Oh, what author is writing crime and espionage fiction today do you like to read? I love when authors are asked to talk about some of their other favorite authors.
Oh, God. I love listening to other authors do that. And my mind almost immediately goes blank. I fall back on the tried and trusted. My favorite. I mean, obviously, Le Carre is huge in this field. Anybody writing spy fiction is if not enthralled to him, at least in awe of him. Other writers writing now, Martin Cruz-Smith. I'm not sure whether we can quite call him a spy novelist, but he is my favorite living thriller writer, I think. I know. Why did I say I think? I know he is. Of the younger writers around, well, let's just stick with Americans for the time being. I mean, Dan Fesperman is fantastic, and Joe Cannon is probably the top of the tree in writing the classic spy novel right now. Charlie Cumming would be the English equivalent of him, I think. John Lawton is also wonderful, but he's a bit of an outlier. He's very individual. He's not really writing the classic spy novel because he always has such an individual and very funny take on it. Charlotte Philby, a new voice in the field, sort of new. She's about 4 novels in now. She's very fine. There are loads of others who I will think of as soon as we finish this conversation.
That's when I asked you before about your history with espionage and espionage fiction, I was curious about that. You've done so much good. You're such a good citizen of the espionage fiction world. I know you wrote that piece on Le Carre's letters for the Times, right? I mean, you're such a great reader and connecting with all of the other writers who are working in this space now. I'm curious if you had that kind of depth of knowledge of this specific field before you started. So before Down Cemetery Road, for example, before your debut novel came out.
I'm not sure I did. I think what I had was a very broad sweep, which dates way back to my teens. When I was reading in the 1970s, I read everything that came within reach. And there were lots of thrillers, a lot of spy novelists. Many of whom have been forgotten now. Some of whom undeservedly so. People like Adam Hall, Desmond Bagley. I mean, Hall was a spy novelist, Bagley thriller writer, but there was spy stuff there. Many others, forgotten now. Books are long since landfill, or will only be found in obscure libraries. But it's just the quantity, really. You read as many of these books as possible when you're an aspiring writer. You read as much of any kind of book, and it all goes in. And some parts of it will stick. I'm a great believer in the idea that reading bad novels is as useful as reading good ones when you're starting out, when you're young. You have to learn what the lessons are, and sometimes the lessons are don't do this, avoid this kind of writing. So it's sheer quantity, really. Everything that I write now is coming out of a well that I started digging when I was 12 or 13, when I started reading adult fiction. But that well probably filled up when I was in my either late teens or early 20s. I'll read wonderful novels now, and I can thoroughly enjoy them, and I don't feel that they're going to influence me. They're not going to change the way that I write. They're not going to necessarily alter my outlook on but all that stuff is already kind of calcified now when I'm writing out of that kind of writing from that same well that I've had.
That's a very, very interesting point. I've never heard anyone express it that way before, and I think that's oh man, now I want to ask other writers about that. Okay, so we have several people want to know when the next Slough House book is coming out. So I think we're looking at fall of 2025, probably.
I think that's probably right. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, everyone who asked that question. I know you want it to be right now, but luckily we do have this incredible backlist. If you haven't, you've read the Slough House novels, I'm assuming you're waiting for the next one. Check out his Oxford, the Zoe Bohm novels, starting with Down Cemetery Road. There are 4 of them. They're fantastic. Check out his 4 standalones. We have a couple novella collections that are all MI5 adjacent. They feature characters who you may recognize contingently from some of the other Slough House books. Lots to love there. And then, but I'm sorry, Mick. We're all just like, give us all the things, Mick. Give us the TV. And come on the publicity tours and talk to us in public. And it's hard being such a commodity, I imagine.
It's always delightful meeting readers. I'll be in the States next year. I will be. I don't know when it is. And you've been shocked into statue form by the.
I think I froze. I think I froze. Sorry. I was very excited to hear you're coming to the States next year, but also my computer is telling me that we're at the 1 hour mark and I'm required to end this event now. Before we say our goodbyes, I just want to remind everyone that they can get a limited signed first edition of Secret Hours. There's the button at the bottom of the screen. These are very limited, so do make sure you hop on it if you want one of those now. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Mystery to Me, for hosting us. And Mick, thank you especially for being here with us today. And,
it's been great. Thank you, Juliet. Thank you, Mystery to Me. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Juliet, it's been great.
Thank you, Mick.
Thank you.